So this is just a breakdown of the entire process flow or the buyer process flow of how we actually executed this go-to-market strategy. So in the first instance, the first webinar, we really didn't want to sell in the first webinar. The purpose of the first webinar was twofold. One, we wanted to deliver value to our persona group, our target persona group, without actually, trying to sell to them, so that they feel that we truly want to deliver value to them. But the other reason was we wanted to test to see if, based on the topic that we decided on, is this something that people would really be interested in, and how could we now follow up with that and expand on that particular content asset from that first webinar. This process flow actually breaks down the second webinar that we did. Once we collected all the insights, once we had the struggle theme and the struggle responses, and how we knew what our positioning would be, the messaging, with the ad campaigns, with the creatives, the content assets. And this is the go-to-market strategy in terms of how we executed all of that. So we ran social media ads promoting the webinar using our flyer creative, and that would lead people to the webinar event sign-up page where they could fill out their information to attend the second webinar. And then we hosted the webinar with our subject matter expert, who I mentioned that we went to this person to figure out, what are the top 3 challenges or topics that person believed the persona group who we wanted to reach out to, our target, would be interested in. And we also partnered with an organization that is very familiar within this particular persona group, because we wanted to use or leverage their credibility and authority that they had with this particular group to say, hey, we've partnered with this particular organization that you're very familiar with, that you trust, that has your best interest at heart, which means that what we're offering to you is actually credible. It's actually of value to you, and so you can trust us because you trust the partner organization, right? So it's very strategic in that way in terms of our go-to-market strategy. Now, from this, so we had the webinar, we delivered the information, the value that we would offer. And then at the end of the webinar, we introduced the product to say, hey, we have this new product offering, this new product that's coming out. We've partnered with this organization that you're very familiar with. And we want to know, based on, what you've heard, whatever brief information we gave at the end of that webinar, who are the people who are interested to find out more about this particular product and, would be, at the very least, curious to know what it entails, in the hopes of actually generating those leads and converting those leads to actual sales for the new product that we were launching. So it was divided into 2 different sets of people. We have the hand raisers and the non-hand raisers. The hand raisers would be people who actually communicated some level of interest to say, hey, we're interested. And for those people, we send them the link to a landing page, which would have all the details of the product, how the partnership came about, why we decided to do the partnership, specific features of the particular product, how it benefits this particular persona group, and basically anything and everything that they would need to know about the particular product. And for those people who actually filled out the form, we passed to sales to follow. Now, and sales use telephone calls to actually follow up with these people. Now, it's very important to understand that even though the product is directed towards the persona group, and even though we were marketing to the persona group is not necessarily decision makers. The persona group is more the influencers who could get the decision makers to decide or influence whether or not, or convince them, persuade them, whatever term you want to use, to actually purchase this product on their behalf because they see the value in it. And so basically it was a way to take people who were necessarily qualified leads and turn them into our own internal champions, where our influencers or our champions could speak on our behalf to the decision makers. So once our salespeople made that phone call to them to follow up with them after they've showed interest, they find out certain information like who's the decision maker, what's your buying process like for a product like this, who needs to be involved, who are the buying committees, the members of the buying committee who needs to be involved in this process to make it happen and make it go through. And the salespeople get all that information, get the information of who the decision maker was to actually follow up, to set a meeting where they would pitch the product, they would communicate the value, and of course we would have our internal champion who would help us to kind of get through the door and help to lower whatever barriers to entry that may have been there to help us or help the sales team make that sale. Well, that is this process in terms of what sales did. Now, from a marketing standpoint, we continue to send email nurtures on the offer. So giving them certain information that we probably couldn't communicate on the landing page because it was too much information. So we sent it we sent an email nurturing over the course of, I think it was 6 weeks or 4 weeks. So just kind of update them and give them more information about the product and the value and the benefit that they would get from it. And finally, we created a separate newsletter, if you will, with a repurposed webinar content to deliver to those people, to actually deliver value to them as well. And as you can see, the arrow points here, which I'm going to break down. The non-hand raisers would be the people who are not interested in the product whatsoever. They didn't show interest. I wouldn't say they're not interested, but they didn't show interest at that particular point in time. Doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't interested at all. It probably just means that at that particular time they weren't interested, but it doesn't mean that they won't be interested after. But the thing about it is that we wanted to ensure that we keep the brand top of mind so that when they are interested, then they would come to us to buy instead of the competitors. So one of the things that we did is we repurposed the webinar content, the same repurposed webinar content that we have for the hand raisers and for the non-hand raisers. And as I mentioned, we created a bi-monthly newsletter that we would send out to them, the repurposed webinar content. We repurposed the content and created, I think it was probably 2 or 3 blog posts that we could share, because not everyone necessarily consumes content in video. So we want to create as many formats as possible for those who consume it, whether in the written form or the video form. And then we created social media posts based on the webinar, the information on the webinar, just tidbits that we could use to increase engagement and deliver value to this particular person or group online.